Hey everyone, you're listening to Fantasy Uptick. I'm Jeremiah Blue, and today with me is Sean Campbell. We are going to be breaking down a Yahoo Fantasy 12-team baseball roto draft that we did together. I had the number 2 pick. Sean had the 12th pick. And with that, let's jump right in. Hey, Sean, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Doing great. Just into the work day, ready to talk a little baseball.
All right. So with that, let's jump right in. This will be a little bit faster. This will be our second time recording this. We actually did this draft yesterday, and my video recording department, they forgot to hit the record button on the computer that's right in front of me, which is that's me. That's my guy. So that's my bad. So we're doing this over one more time. But this is the draft that we did yesterday. And with the second pick of the draft, I take Christian Yelich. Second pick of the draft is really the easiest pick in the draft because you got Ronald Acuna, Christian Yelich. It used to be a tough call because you still had Mike Trout there, who I love taking, but not this year with all the stuff going on with his wife having a baby. We both kind of are on the same department of we don't think he's probably going to play much this year. And if he does, you kind of have to drop him because I don't know how long he's going to miss with the baby coming due and all that stuff. Because he's going to have to leave mid-season if he does show up. And then he'd have to quarantine. There's a chance that he won't even make it to the birth. So we both think that he'll probably end up just staying out for at least a couple of weeks and then maybe show up if the Angels are in some sort of playoff eligibility. I'm assuming you agree with that. Not that I talked to you about this literally just yesterday, but I'll let you give your piece.
Absolutely. I wouldn't draft him at all. In fact, I would just wait till Joe drops him about week 4 when he realizes he's not going to be playing, and then I might pick him up to roster a spot maybe. But even then, I don't know if I could hold him on a roster spot.
Yeah, so we both like I like Bellinger at number 4, honestly. I think I think the top 4 is pretty basic. Oh, well, I like Bellinger at number 3 now that we're moving Trout back, but I do like Bellinger as the third best guy pretty much across the board. And that's where you start talking about pitching. Now, you got lucky at 12, and Jacob deGrom falls all the way to you, which is ridiculous, but I think this has a lot to do. There were 12 people in this draft room, and I think that has a lot to do with experts are talking about like pushing pitching back because of whatever reason, because of the shortened season. I don't see how pushing the elite starters back is going to help you at all because you still need pitching to win. And if you're letting these guys fall, it doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what the experts are saying. And obviously there's a lot of people listening to the experts, and that's why you get Jake deGrom at the 12 spot. Obviously you move to Max Scherzer right after that. I love these 2 picks, but I'll let you talk about them.
Yeah, I felt very lucky getting both of those guys. I would have been happy with either one, and quite honestly, I thought I was going to end up with Bieber, but getting both of those guys at the turn was awesome. That's one good thing about drafting at the end or at the beginning. You can double up on picks. The bad part is now I have to wait so long until I pick again.
Yeah, and I actually thought that one of these pitchers were gonna make it all the way to the back here, where I was back at the 2 spot on the second round, which is the 11th spot. And I really target a pitcher in this spot because I believe it is important to have one of these elite pitchers, but not just one, like 2 or 3 is what I'm trying to target. And Bieber, Buehler, Verlander, Flaherty all get drafted right before I pick, which literally has not happened to me in a single mock draft that I didn't record. So every single mock draft, I typically at least get Verlander. But in this one, they're all gone. And Bieber almost is never gone this early. So Bieber leaves early too. And I'm a big fan of Cleveland's schedule. So I like Mike Clevinger and Shane Bieber this year. So I end up taking J.D. Martinez because J.D. Martinez has never made it this far. I did not realize Freddie Freeman was on the board. I would have really heavily considered Freddie Freeman. And I know he's dropping down a lot of people's lists because of the whole COVID thing. But I'm not necessarily at this point scared away at the COVID thing because I almost feel like you're less likely to get it in the season if you get it prior to showing up. With pitchers, it's a little different because you got to get into that rhythm before you can actually go out there and put together you got to get stretched out like during the spring. So that's what all these guys are doing currently. But with a batter, like Freddie Freeman, I'm not afraid to draft a guy like Freeman because I think even if he misses 4 games, now don't get me wrong, I'm totally down to push guys down who are going to be missing games, but 4 games or so as he warms up and gets ready to get to your lineup, I'm actually maybe even targeting guys that have COVID and are going to already have had it under their belt showing up to the season. What is your thought on like the whole COVID thing?
In the first 2-3 rounds of the draft, I really want a player that I think is going to be there the whole season for me. Obviously, injuries can happen, but the less conditioning you do prior to the season start, the higher your chances of getting an injury anyway. Freddie Freeman always has a snake in his helmet bag, it seems like. He gets hurt in the most random ways. Every year, it seems like he's got something going on. And he's great here, but you go in with less conditioning into a season, I just am going to shy away from him. If he was there in the 4th round, I would take him, but I wouldn't take him in the first 3.
Okay, so you agree with the JD Martinez pick there then, I assume. Okay, so I take JD Martinez. I don't think there's much debate there about like whether that was a good or bad pick. JD Martinez fell. He usually goes way higher than this. I come back around now. I did reach on Mike Clevenger based off of ADP. And typically when I'm drafting, I love to play where ADP is, but it's so hard to do that when you're drafting at either in the corners, like the second, or like you're drafting at the end. You can't really wait for guys to fall to you because it's so long until it gets back to me again. So again, I go Clevenger there because I just believe this year's schedule is going to make a way bigger difference than it would typically make in your standard season because you're playing essentially just within your division. So, if you have a weak division, that's going to be a big deal. And then the teams that you play on the other division as well. So Cleveland and Minnesota are 2 teams that I'm really targeting, Minnesota being the one that I'm really, really targeting. But I like Clevenger. I think he was a guy that was kind of – a lot of the guys that were kind of going to go late due to injuries and stuff, really their ADP hasn't risen to the point where they should be just yet. So if you're drafting this early, you can take advantage of a lot of that at this point. So it comes back to you. You go Clayton Kershaw and Alberto Mondesi.
Yeah, I went Kershaw again because I love starting pitching, but he fell to me. I wasn't expecting to get a Clayton Kershaw, and that's one advantage of drafting here. You just pick what falls to you, and then you adjust your draft accordingly. You can have all the draft strategy you want, but when you're waiting so long between picks, the draft really dictates who you need to take. And that's why I went ahead and grabbed Alberto Mondesi. I knew my pitching was already going to be looking good. I wanted to start shoring up some other stats. And stolen bases is one of those stats that you can shore up with 1 or 2 players. You don't have to commit a whole lot of resources to it. And going ahead and grabbing Mondesi here really shores up those stolen bases.
I definitely don't hate the Mondesi pick here because I totally get what you're saying right now. Like stolen bases is going to be one of those things that – and Mondesi will have value even if he starts slow just by giving you those stolen bases. And now you can kind of draft the rest of your draft without really worrying about it. Based on your first 3 rounds, I like guys, me personally, like Marte because it gives you a little bit more options in the rest of your draft to kind of let it fall to you, it falls to you just fine. But that's just something that I typically will do when I take like 3 back-to-back pitchers is try to get one of those guys like a Marte because he qualifies second, short, and outfield, and it kind of allows me to be flexible later in my draft if somebody falls to me in certain ways. And so like I said, this is a Yahoo draft, so they go 10 bats and 8 starting pitching. So there's still a little tick towards bats in this format, but it's not as bad as like ESPN. And starting pitching, again, there's just a bigger drop-off for me at starting pitching than there is at bats. So we come back around, and this goes back to what I was saying about liking the guys with certain schedules, and I do want good starting pitching. I typically go a little higher starting pitching here. I go Luis Castillo because I just absolutely love his schedule. Again, this is back to the schedule thing, but I also love his talent. So talented receivers, God dang it, I'm not going to get these guys right. Talented, I've been doing a lot of football podcasts as well, obviously. So talented pitchers with teams that have good schedules, I'm really targeting this year's draft. Comes back around. This goes back to I'm not able to allow myself to let guys fall to me because I really think Aaron Judge is in the 5th round is just too far back if he's healthy. And everything I'm reading is that he is going to be healthy this year. I mean, it wasn't too long ago. He was a 1st-round pick based off of his upside. So this guy could be the best player. Like, he could be a top 4 pick this year if he was healthy. Like, if he was healthy last year and coming into it this year with no injury issues. So getting him in the 5th round, I just feel great about. He sometimes will fall to you in the 6th round. So this is a guy that if you're not drafting at the 2 spot, and you can wait on him in the 6th to keep an eye on, because he's not going where he would normally go right now based on the fact that he was injured coming in, but this delay has really allowed him to rest up on that period. And I'm a big fan of Aaron Judge this year and where he's been falling. I did think of Tyler Glasnow at this spot, but I was thinking if one of these guys was going to fall to me, it was going to be Glasnow. I was way wrong. Glasnow goes 4 picks in, and that's the difference between doing auto drafts with computer and then drafting with 12 people. There's a lot of people thinking the way you are in these types of drafts. So it goes back to you, and the ageism hits. It seems like it hits every single draft because, again, Charlie Morton was another guy I was thinking of when I drafted Judge. I knew he wasn't going to fall to me, but the ageism takes toll. And even in this short season, when you're not expecting these guys to throw a whole season, like you don't need to be the most durable to make it through this short season. Zach Greinke and Charlie Morton fall to you. What do you think about those picks? Obviously, you already had 3 pitchers.
Yeah, again, taking the draft as it falls to me. Zach Greinke and Charlie Morton are my last 2 kind of like elite level starting pitchers. So I went ahead and grabbed them. To me, this shores up my starting rotation. I don't have to worry about starting pitchers. I'll take whatever comes later. Zach Greinke's going to get me Ks no matter what. He might not get a lot of wins in Arizona, but he's going to get those Ks. Charlie Morton's just a really good pitcher. I don't care how old he is. So, value-wise, as the season goes on, those guys are definitely a high-value pick for me.
Yeah, I can't help it. So I have that ageism too. Like I get nervous about taking these old guys because at some point they do fall off a cliff, and when they fall, a lot of times they fall hard. I don't think either one of these guys are going to fall off the cliff this year. But as I was thinking between Judge and Morton, I was kind of thinking maybe I just take Judge because I kind of have more faith in him as a younger player who's right in the prime of his career, where Charlie Morton's on the back end of his career. But I have no problem with Morton, especially there, because I was already thinking about taking him as early as I was drafting. So it comes back to me. This is once again, Max Muncy's got a finger issue, and I kind of reach based on where I am. I have guys that I like to have on my roster. Max Muncy, as I was saying earlier, I took 3 outfielders. So my infield, I basically am going to have to let the draft kind of fall to me on my infield. But a guy like Max Muncy's got first base eligibility, second base eligibility, and third base eligibility in Yahoo. So this is going to allow me to kind of adjust the way I draft as I continue through this draft, right? So I come back through it. Him and Corbin are the last of my elite pitchers. Corbin usually doesn't fall this far, to be honest, but Burroughs is basically the last pitcher that I deem elite, And the reason I deem him elite this specific season is because he's on the Twins and he's just going to have a cake schedule throughout this year. And I feel good about drafting him, whereas Corbin's got a little tougher schedule throughout the season. So even though I really like Corbin, I actually think Corbin's a better pitcher. I go with the guy that is a good pitcher, that possibly great, and has an easier schedule. So I go Boros. I feel good about that pick. Comes back to you, and you go Nick Castellanos and DJ LeMahieu. Talk about those picks real quick.
Yeah, so at this point, it's obvious to anyone who's watching, I need to start fixing up my bats. I love Nick Castellanos, not just because for fantasy, because he hits home runs and he's a fun player to watch. He's just an old school player, high leg kick, swings hard, runs fast, just plays the game right. So he's an easy guy to root for, and I like getting those guys on my roster when I can because I enjoy watching the games too. And DJ LeMahieu gives some position flexibility. He's also a really good hitter playing in New York. So they got that short porch out there, so he can string together a week or two of quite a few home runs and pop me up in the categories. just like Castellanos playing in Cincinnati. When it's hot, and it's going to be hot, Cincinnati, the ball just jumps out of there. So
yeah. Going back to DJ LeMahieu, talking about the fact that you already have your shortstop locked up, which I mean is one of the tougher positions to lock up this season, especially when you're talking about like the elite guys. You get DJ LeMahieu, who qualifies at first, second, and third. So moving forward in the draft, this is going to allow you a little bit of that flexibility. Like if a first baseman falls to you, which we see in the next round, Josh Bell does, DJ LeMahieu doesn't, just because it says first on the screen, doesn't mean you're going to be playing him at first base. You'll probably be playing him at second or third so that Josh Bell can be your first baseman. And that's something to think about when you're drafting, because again, that gives you that positional flexibility, which I think is going to be huge this year, especially when we're talking about the coronavirus and the whole pandemic thing. Like once one guy gets COVID, all of a sudden we're going to start hearing a bunch of guys get COVID. And this is different than like the NBA where they're going to be playing in a bubble. There's going to be precautions that they're taking, but they're still going to be traveling to and from other teams and other locations. So baseball players will be getting COVID this year. That's probably going to happen. So having that position flexibility in this season is something that I value just way more than I would in any other season as opposed to this. So we come back and like I've been talking about, I go Jeff McNeil here. Now, Marcus Semien was sitting there, and I don't end up getting a good shortstop I feel comfortable with. So this is a spot that I could have probably went shortstop, but I go with Jeff McNeil because Jeff McNeil is a second base, third base, and outfielder. And like I said, I personally, and it's hard to quantify what position flexibility really gives you, but in this particular season, I think it's super valuable, not to mention it's such a short season that the Mondays and Thursdays, people are still going to be not playing. Like there's breaks in the schedule. So if I have those bats off the bench, the worst thing is when you got a guy on your bench that hits like a home run and you're like in a tight race in Roto for home run. He's got 4 RBIs or something like that. And you're just like, oh man. So you want to be able to get those guys in your starting lineup on Monday and Thursday, because if you got too many outfielders or whatever and you can't get those guys in, that position flexibility really allows you to do that, right?
I was going to say, it's really terrible when you got a guy on your bench that you can't play and you got guys in your starting lineup that are not playing. So
yeah.
It's like, oh, this is terrible. I hate this.
Yeah. And no, for real. And that is what that position flexibility allows you to do. Sonny Gray was my next guy, and I'm just a big fan. Again, this is another Cincinnati pitcher that I like the schedule. I like the talent. This is a guy who had a big 2019 year, and due to the schedule, I think he can have another big year this season. So I felt good about Sonny Gray, and I know you're a Sonny Gray guy. So
I love that guy. Great pitcher, great pedigree. He was a number 1 draft pick, I believe. And he's just always been waiting to break out. I've been watching him for years, and he finally looks like he's turned that corner to being a really good starting pitcher.
Yeah. So it comes to you. You take Josh Bell, as we kind of already talked about, because you have shortstops kind of set. DJ LeMahieu can play either second, third, or first. But since Josh Bell falls to you, you go ahead and take the shot on Josh Bell there, and then you kind of shear up your first base, and then you go with Edwin Diaz. Talk to me a little bit about Edwin Diaz.
Okay, I think Edwin Diaz is going to be the primary closer. This may be a year where teams go with multiple closers anyway. I think Edwin Diaz is going to be the number 1 closer in New York. How many games they win, I don't know. But they look like they got a pretty good team out there. And DeGrom, maybe I'll get a win, and Diaz gets me the save, and it'll be a nice, happy day for me.
Yeah, the Mets, not the Nets. I'm sorry. The Mets always seem to be one of those teams that just deal with injuries year in, year out, but they have talented guys. If they just kind of put it all together in this short season, they could be one of those teams that is way underrated as a team. And Diaz, I agree with you. I think he'll probably be the primary closer. They did just recently come out with an article, and that was like an hour before we did this draft. So no blaming you here for taking Diaz. Because Diaz was going into it as the primary closer, but that they were going to try and do a little bit more closer by committee. And those kind of comments from the GMs just kind of make me nervous. You know what I mean? Anyway, so it comes back down to me. I go, this is basically round 10 is the round in 12-team drafts, Roto. that I've been kind of focusing on getting my first closer, and I'll usually go back to back, so 10 and 11. But I try to get at least 3 within 10 through 14, 15, round either, 10 through round 15. I like to get 4 because closer to me is one of those things that you can always trade away because somebody in your league, especially in Roto, needs saves at that trade deadline. And it's just the easiest thing to say trade away because this is the only place you can get that asset. And a lot of times in these 12-team Roto leagues, there's no closers in free agency, especially when you're talking about leagues that have kind of deeper pitcher benches. So I do like getting at least 4 closers, and I don't usually go after the elite guys. Don't get me wrong. I think if elite guy falls to me at 10, and I'm big on Ken Giles. I am actually higher on Ken Giles than I'm on Hendricks, but most people are not. So I kind of gamble here so that I can get both the closers that I want at this spot. Goes back to you. You go Kyle Hendricks. You get, this is your first Cub of the draft, which is not like you, but I knew one was coming, especially once we get to this point. So talk to us a little bit about Kyle Hendricks.
The professor, he's a good pitcher to have. He's going to give you quality innings. He's not going to walk a lot of players. He's going to have a low whip. Cubs are going to win a lot of games. At least that's what I feel in my heart of hearts. So it's a quality pitcher to get. I know my pitching's already good. Maybe I should have went for someone else. My hopes was Wilson Contreras would have fallen to me because that was the Cub I wanted the most. And I was like, well, maybe Kyle Schwarber will. And you can see they were both the same round I was wanting to take them. So in a moment of, well, I need a Cub, I went ahead and got Kyle Hendricks. Then I followed him with Raisel Iglesias because he's a really, really hard throwing relief pitcher for Cincinnati. So he's going to get some wins or saves. I mean.
Yeah, and they have an easy schedule this year, like I keep saying. So Iglesias might be one of those guys that really blows up. I also like Contreras. He's kind of usually the pitcher that I like to target because he's like the last of the elite pitchers, in my opinion. Most like the last couple of years, it seems like that's been the case. This year, though, the catcher is just kind of. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of games anyway, and then. Now, so even for your outfielders, they're not going to play a lot of games. And now you're talking about catchers, they're going to play even fewer games. So I just feel so bad investing a lot of stock into a catcher. So I kind of lean more towards other positions. And I'm just I've got a catcher that I really like at the end of drafts this year. And we'll talk about it when we get to them. But that's basically where I'm going with catcher this year. I'm just kind of punting it, to be honest with you. I'm punting catcher because I just don't feel like it's going to hurt me that bad. I would rather put that stock in on a starting pitcher, a reliever, or an elite bat, which is where the elite kind of catchers are going in this range. So
the reason I like Contreras is because his backup is Victor Caratini.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a really good hitter too. So if I could pair those two up, I'm going to have a starting catcher virtually every day except for a Cubs off day. Whereas opposed to any other catcher I'm going to get, I'm probably going to be missing 2 or maybe 3 games out of the week, depending on how their schedule lines up. And plus, Caratini often will grab a first base eligibility because he's Rizzo's #1 backup at first base.
Oh, and you gotta take into account with the Cubs this year. Now they're going to have that extra DH that they're not used to having. So you never know if Contreras ends up taking that DH spot if he starts off hot this year. I doubt that that's going to be the case, but it's very possible is my point. So
I'd say Schwarber is going to be the DH.
Yeah, you guys are kind of loaded in the outfield, so it makes sense. But again, with injuries, I know that Contreras isn't too far down that list people start popping with COVID or just getting normal injuries in that roster. So the next guy is Julio Urias that I get. And this is, again, one of those guys that there was always going to be like a pitching limit associated with them. And I don't think ADP has really adjusted to the fact that there's not going to be one this year. And he's got some elite stuff and could really finish as like a top 10 pitcher, and I'm getting him this late in the draft. I was absolutely loving getting him. I actually considered taking him in the 10th round when I was drafting up there, and the fact that he falls here, again, I just like to take my closers early in the 10th round because I don't want to wait too long on that. Comes back around, I have my closers. I feel great about my pitching at this point. right? I am actually, believe it or not, thinking Rich Hill here because I think Rich Hill is one of those guys that ADP and just the world hasn't realized is going to be a guy that you need to draft high. He plays for the Twins. And basically, anytime Rich Hill pitches, it's good to start him. You want to start Rich Hill. It's just a matter of throughout history, he hasn't been a guy that stays healthy very often. He plays very short into seasons. And, well, good news is this is a short season. So Rich Hill is a guy I'm thinking about here. I keep waiting, just playing that ADP game. That is a game that I typically like to play. I didn't play it as well as I typically do in this draft, but I did play it with him. I go Justin Turner because I really needed a third base at this point. I had kind of my setup. I didn't really like the rest of the second base guys here. The only guy I was kind of considering was Biggio, but I kind of trusted Justin Turner a little bit more. Again, Dodgers, they're going to have that extra DH, so I think Turner gets on the field pretty regularly. Again, he's going to be a guy that will never hurt you when he's batting. These consistent guys, and with this particular season, I want guys that are putting up good averages. I know a lot of people are talking punt averages, but I just don't want to get in a hole this year because it's going to be so hard to climb out of a hole this season. So getting in that stolen bases hole and trying to find a guy to trade you somebody that will get you out of that, and getting in that average hole is going to be tough. I mean, there's power all over the place. So even though I like power, and I obviously went with 3 power guys right off the bat, don't get me wrong, I still want RBIs and all that stuff, but it just average and guys that are going to be consistent from the batting perspective and pitching, just basically across the board, ERA, whip, average. I just don't want to get into those kind of holes that will kind of mess me up going forward. So
yeah, I don't think you should punt any category. So maybe a position like you're doing catcher, but definitely not a category.
Okay, so speaking of not putting categories, you go Miguel Sano and really add some real potential to your home run area there.
Yeah, my bats are pretty weak at this point, so I had to get the last really big power hitter that was left on the board. This is like your ultimate lottery ticket, though, because number one, he often gets injured. Number two, he has legal issues going right now that could potentially cost him the whole season. And he's super streaky. He could be terrible the whole season because it's only 60 games, or he could be super hot and really carry my team on.
Yeah. But if we go back and look, I want to point something out that you did. You drafted LeMahieu, right? So Initially he was your first baseman. That's what you're thinking, right? But then you get, what's his nuts to fall to you, who's a first baseman, Bell. Bell falls to you as a first baseman. So you move LeMahieu to either second or third. And now you get Miguel Sano, who qualifies at third because you like him and he falls to you at this point. So now you're moving LeMahieu to second. So that flexibility has really allowed you to go after the guys you want in the draft because you had such flexibility to kind of move people around and kind of frees you up. You go Archie Bradley next. I like Archie Bradley. Archie Bradley is one of those guys that just seems to never break out. And he's always got a lot of hype coming into the league. Like, he's going to be the closer for sure this year. And then he'll always start off like crap. But this year, I think he's going to be the closer.
I draft him almost every year because I'm like, well, he's too good. He's too good not to be the closer. And then every year it turns out, nope, he's the setup guy. Not this year. This year's Archie Bradley. I believe in you, Archie.
You're gonna drive that bandwagon right off the cliff. So,
so as long as it takes.
So I think a guy that's being undervalued this year is Gallegos, because Gallegos actually plays for a good team, but they have Hicks in the background. Like, oh, Hicks, the weighted season, Hicks is going to come back and be the closer. I just don't see how Gallegos comes out there, is good, starts off good, right? Doesn't have a bad, doesn't blow any saves or anything like that. That they're just going to turn around and give the ball to a guy who's been rehabbing this whole time. I just think that people are overestimating Hicks taking that closer job away. I think Gallegos is the guy. I think this is great value for him. And at this point, I go ahead and get a fourth closer because I like Keela. I just think that getting him at this spot, I just thought that was value. I knew he was going to be the last good closer that I really had any kind of desire to have off the board. I actually don't mind Ian Kennedy, who goes a little later, but again, that's the Royals, and how good are they going to be? I just think Keela's going to he's going to be a good pitcher this year. I just believe that. Now, how many opportunities he's going to have on the Pirates to win games, I have no idea, but I know the ratios are going to be good. And like I said, I like having 4 closers, and this is a guy that if I get to a certain number where I feel comfortable right before that trade deadline, I need something else, I could trade him, who's not going to give me that many saves, or I can trade one of my other closers and feel comfortable going forward to the last part of the season with 3 closers, Keela being one of them, right?
Right.
So we get back to you. You take your first catcher. Talk a little bit about Will Smith.
I like Will Smith. He's actually the last catcher on the board that I want to draft. And you went after him. It's like, if I don't get Will Smith, I'll take whoever's left at the end of the draft and just go ahead and go with that. But he comes to Colorado a lot. He likes to hit here in Colorado. And, if you're going to go with a catcher, go with a guy that's going to play in Colorado a lot.
Yeah, that's not a bad strategy. Get into guys that are going to be, because this year a lot of people are going to be playing Colorado a lot. Obviously, Rockies are going to be playing a lot of Colorado, which you'll see me do here in the next little bit. But then you go Biggio, and I like Biggio. Again, I thought about drafting him in the 13th round, and you get him here at the end of the beginning of the 16th. So talk a little bit about Biggio.
Love rooting for his dad, even though he played for Houston. But he gives some power. He gives a good bat. He'll steal some bases. He also plays in the outfield, so he's going to be on the field a lot. Is a quality bat, and I just need bats that are going to be playing, and he's going to be playing every game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I do like guys that have that pedigree of, a father who's played in the MLB and stuff like that. He came in last year and he looked good. So I like Biggio. Again, another reason why I was thinking about taking him earlier in this draft. Now, Rich Hill, I go with here. And again, this was a guy that I had already said that I really wanted to have on my roster. I just think anytime I could start Rich Hill, anytime he's starting or playing, I'm going to feel very comfortable with him in the game. And this is where I get kind of desperate, because I start looking at the landscape, and I missed out on Segura. I missed out on Andrews, and I missed out on a couple of other shortstops that I kind of wanted throughout this whole draft. And I was just like, man, I'm getting kind of desperate here. I need to go ahead and grab a shortstop that I feel comfortable with. And there wasn't one. So I ended up going with Garrett Hampson, just to get one that I thought could really kind of break out. So Garrett Hampson in the minors, he never hit below 300 any of his minor league tour, right? Now last year he kind of started off slow in the first 80 games. He hit a 212, but in the last 25 he really turned on, hit a 330, and in that stretch he had 5 home runs, 9 steals. I couldn't remember if it was 9 home runs and 5 steals, but yeah, he had 5 home runs and 9 steals. So when he's hitting, and again, the Rockies are not going to have an extra spot to have a DH, and I think that one of either him or Hillard is going to really benefit from this. I ended up taking Hillard later. I'm hoping it's Hampson, because Hampson, again, anytime he plays, if he ends up being a 300 hitter, which I know he's capable of being, he's going to get a lot of steals. And at this point, the one thing I'm struggling at is steals and shortstop. So this potentially fills that hole with this pick. And again, this is the guy I'm reaching for, but he's got second base eligibility, shortstop, and outfit. So he not only is he filling that need that I have, but he also has the ability to fill other positions on my roster, assuming he gets the playing time that I'm hoping he's going to get this year.
Yeah, that's not a bad pick. You missed out on Paul DeJong and Elvis Andrews. Either one of those guys could have really helped you out a lot.
Yeah, Elvis Andrews. So I was actually thinking of Elvis Andrews during the Keela pick, but I was like, you know what? I'll get him on the next round, and then he ends up getting drafted shortly after that. So I probably could have taken him at the Keela spot. Hindsight's 20/20, because Elvis Andrews is going to play every day, and he's going to get steals because the Texas Rangers love to run, which is something I've kind of look into. A lot of people talk about how fast are they? Because if they're super fast, and what is their steal rate and all this stuff, which a lot of managers look into, but I'd like to look into what teams like to let them run, right? So Texas is one of those teams that likes to do that. You go Kyle Tucker and then Malik Smith. So
Kyle Tucker was a former top prospect for Houston, and they've done a pretty good job of developing talent over the years. I'm going to believe in their farm system a little bit. he's really devalued over what his potential is. So I'm hoping he taps into some of that and gives me some outfield power. If not, though, he's going to be quick onto the waiver wire because I'm not going to wait around on him.
Yeah.
Malik Smith is more of a defensive pick for me because I didn't want someone getting cheap steals because I invested into Mondesi. I didn't want someone just go ahead and grabbing Malik Smith in this round or later, throwing them in there, forgetting to set their lineup, stop playing, and get steals on me. That's what I didn't want.
Yeah, that's a classic Campbell strategy right there. Let me ruin somebody else's day. So
I want the category. I don't want someone else to get it. So even if he's not going to play a lot for me, but he's definitely not playing for someone else, and he's not taking my steals.
Yeah, I like it. So I go Howie Kendricks here, and again, this is one of those picks, and there's a trend with me. I look at the schedule recently, and I'm looking at guys that are going to benefit from the addition of the DH. And then, of course, guys that people thought were injured and I think are going to be healthy by the time the season starts, and their ADP really hasn't adjusted to it. But Howie Kendricks is, I think, going to be the biggest beneficiary of the DH there in DC. So I love Howie Kendricks, getting Howie Kendricks here, and he's probably one of those guys that I'm going after basically in every draft because he's got first, second, and third base eligibility. And he didn't play, he wasn't an everyday guy last year, but when he did play, he was putting up elite numbers on a per bat basis. So I think if he's an everyday guy this year, he could do that. And then he could, he's going to be a steal here at pick in round 18. Willie Calhoun, again, going back to the trend I have, which is a guy who's going to benefit because he was injured because he got hit by a fastball in spring training, and now he's completely healthy, and he's basically going to be an everyday guy. He was one of those high prospect type guys, and now he's going to be, he's going to basically have either left field basically to himself this year. Comes back around to you, and you get Dansby Swanson.
Yeah, Dansby Swanson's my backup shortstop. So I drafted a shortstop only, and I don't have any other players really that I can plug into that position. So I needed someone to fill in those off days or in case of an injury. And Dansby Swanson's serviceable. He's, again, former high value prospect. I think his best days are ahead of him, not behind him for sure. So hopefully this year I'll benefit from that.
Yeah, so I like that. And you brought up a very good point when you were talking about that you needed a backup shortstop. So we talked a little bit, about COVID could hit anybody at any time. And you're probably going to miss out on guys for like 2 weeks. But also the fact that Monday and Thursdays, you're still going to get guys that have off days, and having that guy who can fill that spot on those days is going to be huge because your whole rest of your team might be playing, and the only spot you have available to put somebody in is shortstop, and you don't have a backup shortstop. So again, that's something that I am totally looking at as well. You go Cole Hamels next, and I'll let you talk about Cole Hamels.
Cole Hamels, pretty old, maybe over the hill, but in round 20, he's gonna be a starting pitcher in Atlanta, and they're gonna win a lot of games. And I think he's still got some good stuff. So he's just shoring up the side of my roster that was already strong, so now I don't have to worry about missing a lot of starts.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. He is an old guy. I really kind of have this sneaking suspicion that a lot of these old guys are going to start hot because they're the guys that kind of know how to get themselves ready to go versus some of the young guys are so – I mean, they're just not as mature. I mean, simple as that. Just like normal people in everyday life. Who you're gonna, if you have a long layoff and let's say you've been teleworking for the last 3 months, and first week of work starts back up, who do you have faith is gonna be, hit the ground running? It's all the old guys, right? The guys that are in charge, the guys who've been around for a while. All the young guys have gone into a lull, as it were. So I don't hate getting old guys, especially this late in the draft, because I do kind of have a little inkling that they're going to be the guys that kind of hit the ground running. It comes back to me, and basically what you did with Swanson, I do with Dubon. I don't have a backup shortstop, and the one shortstop that I have, I don't even know if he's going to be an everyday guy. I do believe he'll get a lot of playing time, but Dubon I think is going to get a lot of playing time. So he might end up being my starting second baseman. And he is a guy that dealt with an injury in 2018, but 2015 through 2017, he was a steals machine in the minor leagues. He got 30. And on the last year, I believe he got 33. Was it 33? 38. So he got 38 in his in 2017 in the minor leagues. 2018 he had an injury. I think if he can get healthy, he hasn't really run much since then. If he can get healthy, he's a guy that could end up running if he can get back to that form. He's still a young dude, and he hits about a 300. So from that perspective, I'm really just going after a guy that I know is not going to hurt me. He's going to play every day, and he kind of fills that shortstop spot, and he's got upside if he starts running. And again, like I said earlier, speed is one of the things that I'm missing on my roster. It comes back around to me, and I go with Francisco Mejia. This is my guy. This is my catcher. Being that I'm punting catcher, people aren't drafting this guy. And he was a big time prospect just in 2018. He has great numbers in the minors. I hear good things coming out of training camp. He just continues to fail in Major League Baseball, but at some point he's going to hit it. It's like you said earlier, it's like you just keep waiting for these guys to catch on. And I think this is the guy that's going to catch on. But at the end of the day, I have no problem dropping him and just going after any hot catcher at any given time. Like I said, I don't want to spend a lot of stock into that. I'm kind of punting the category, but this is a guy that's got a lot of upside in my opinion. And then it comes back to you. You go John Gray from Colorado.
Yep. John Gray put actually a quiet, really good year together last year. So might as well take a shot on him. Maybe he'll keep it going. Or he'll be dropped really quickly because he gets blown out of the water here in Colorado. I don't know. But the upside's there, so I went ahead and took him. And that's the same thing with Aquino. He's such a streaky hitter. He's very capable of putting together a 2-week stretch where he leads the league in home runs for those 2 weeks. So I'd rather have him on my roster and hope to catch one of those hot spots. And if he looks like he's slumping, I'll just have him on my bench.
Okay. Comes back to me, and as we talked about, I took Hampson earlier. Now I'm taking Hillard because I think one of these guys is going to benefit from the DH spot in Colorado, so I kind of hedged my bets here. What I've been doing recently is taking May and Stripley, which Stripley I take last year because I think one of those guys is going to be the fifth starter in the Dodgers, and whichever one's the starter is being way underdrafted, right? So May has already been drafted, so I'm going to roll with Stripling. I actually think it's going to be Stripling who ends up getting that starting role anyway, but I typically will draft them both at this spot. Instead, I end up hedging my bets due to the way the draft kind of fell to me with two Colorado guys, and I'm going to end up dropping whichever one's not benefiting from it. But again, Hillard is one of those guys that's got a lot of upside if he becomes one of those everyday kind of guys, and he can really add to my stolen bases that I kind of need at this point. And then you get the last pick with Gio Urshela.
Yeah, he's a good hitter. He had a good year last year, actually. Quiet, good year for the Yankees, if that's possible. So the potential's there. Again, if he hits it, he hits it. If he doesn't, it's an easy guy to drop and pick up whoever's hot.
Yeah, so this is my team here. We go at catcher, we go Francisco Mejia. You got Max Muncy. That again, if you see the eligibility here, and again, I'm just valuing that so much this year. Muncy can play either first, second, or third. I got McNeil who can play second or third or outfield. I got Turner, Hampson, who again second, third, or outfield. And then my outfield is super strong with Yelich, Martinez, and Judge. That's clearly the strength of my unit. I go Hendricks first, second, or third again. Calhoun, who I like, and I'm a Rangers fan, and like you kind of said earlier, you want to draft guys that you like to root for and you like to watch all their games. And it's fun that way. Dubon is one of those picks. Like I said, he's got upside for steals, a little higher upside than I think people realize, and he fills that shortstop need that I have. And if Hampson doesn't get relatively everyday starts, I can put Dubon as my starter and just put Hampson in there. Now, I like Hampson. Anytime he starts, I feel good about Hampson. He's going to be a guy that's going to give me steals for sure, and I think he's capable of hitting about 300. So, but if I don't get him starting every day, I'll use Dubon as my everyday guy and just rotate Hampson in when he's playing. And then Hillard is a guy that I think could definitely benefit from the DH situation. and could end up being one of those guys that plays basically every day as well. My pitching staff I really liked. I went with 4 relievers. Again, my strategy is always to go ahead and go heavy on relievers because they're the easiest position to trade, in my opinion, when it comes to fantasy baseball. And then I just loved all my pitchers. Hill fell to me. Again, Stripling falls to me. If he doesn't become that 5th starter, then I can just I have no problem starting on that first week. He's going to pitch. He just won't give me a win or anything like that. He's a good pitcher. So then I can drop him, find another guy that I kind of like, or another batter that I kind of like at this point. With my bench, I like to go either 2 and 3. So it doesn't matter whether I'm doing 3 bats and 2 guys on my bench and my pitching stat. I typically don't want to go lean more than that in either direction because I like having guys for those off days. I like being able to fill in for injuries, and basically that's my strategy. So let's go to you, and let's zoom in. Oh, that's not you. Here you are. Buried the lead there with my with them ranking me first overall there. So in the projection. So here you go. You got well, like this. So basically you're elite in pitching. Pitching is really where you kind of hang your hat here, and your ratios are going to be good because you're big 5. And then when you go to your catching or your batters, you're basically just looking to finish middle of the pack. You did a good job of getting steals with just basically 2 players, and you didn't really do too bad in the outfield. I like this. I like your roster quite a bit, honestly. I wasn't in love with the bats that you picked just because I like guys different than you do. But I mean, I love the fact that you went elite in pitching, and it's not really that hard to finish somewhere in the middle of the pack when it comes to bats. As long as you're paying attention and you're fighting to stay in there, you should finish like number 1 in pitching this season, right? So let's go to the projections, which are never that accurate unless they got me first, and they do. So this is definitely one of the more accurate projections I've seen in Yahoo. So they got me here, Jeremiah, in first place with a total of 78 points, and then Sean found his way here at 3rd spot with 70. So not that bad. I only beat you by like 8 points on the year, according to the projections. But we'll let the listeners tell us who they think won. A couple of questions. I'm curious what the fantasy community has an answer to, or like what their opinions on this is. What are you doing with Mike Trout this year? Let's assume that he is going to play, but he's also going to his, to his child's birth. So I don't know how long that means he's got to be out, quarantined, and all that stuff. So that's just that's curiosity to me on what are people doing with Mike Trout. And then, who do you guys think won this draft? So you got anything else to add, Campbell?
No, I don't have anything else to add other than I clearly won the draft. The projections just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's usually what I say too when I don't win it. So anyways, well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening. Remember to hit a like and subscribe if you like the content. And until next time, see ya.